Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
You are welcome here.
No matter your religious beliefs or lack of belief, you are welcome here.
No matter your age, sex, sexual orientation or gender identity, you are welcome here.
No importa tu ciudadanía, tú estás bienvenido aquí.
No matter your citizenship, politics,
or relationship status.
No matter your physical characteristics or health, you are welcome here.
Whoever you are, wherever you are from,
you are welcome in this place. Good morning, and welcome to the online worship of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Montgomery for Sunday, May 16th, 2021. I'm speaking to you from the ancestral lands of the Muskogee Creek people. And this space is a little bit different today. You may be aware I recently moved just around the corner and we're still getting the house set up. I would like to invite you into this hour of worship with words from the Reverend Bill Sinkford. Reverend Sinkford was the first Black Unitarian Universalist Association president and returned to service. He came back as part of a triumvirate presidency during an emergency time in the association. In 2017, several very high-level resignations in the association, including the president of the association, arose from a firestorm of controversy around the innate white supremacy culture, which was part of the association's hiring practices. And these three ministers, all people of color, the Reverend Bill Sinkford, the Reverend Sophia Betancourt, and Dr. Leon Spencer, submitted a report at the end of their service. In the conclusion of that report, Bill Sinkford writes, "There is a reason that people of color have become Unitarian Universalists from the very beginning of this faith and still today. There is a fundamental hope in our values and our aspirations that speaks to persons across the boundaries of race and culture and language and economic circumstance and ability. It is the empowerment in our Unitarian legacy and the love of our Universalist promise that draw people to us and that keep us here. It is our culture and not our theology that has been our biggest obstacle. And because that is true, our final message is a message of hope. We can change our culture if we have the will to do it. Now I invite those who would like to join me speaking our Congregational Covenant. We, the members and friends of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Montgomery, promise to serve our community with open minds, willing hearts, and helping hands as we respect one another, honoring that our perceptions may differ, value our differences, working to better understand them in conflict, give joyfully of ourselves, being in harmony with our capabilities, and embrace our connections with each other, nature, the global community, and the great mystery of life. And now we'll hear from our coordinator of religious education, Roger Burdett, with A Time for All Ages.
Why do we have to say Black Lives Matter? It's in the story. Let's check it out. Welcome to Time for All Ages. Well, if you joined us last week for our excellent experiment with a live service, I introduced this brand new book, The Ellises and the Time Machine. Why do we have to say Black Lives Matter? Written by Deval Ellis, illustrated by H.H. Pax, and published by McBride Collection of Stories. And I have tried to get in touch with them about this book. I like this book, and it looks like they have some others that would also be of interest to us. So we picked up the story last week, and the story began with 9-year-old Jackson in this Ellis family and his father watching a basketball game, and the basketball game flashed up Black Lives Matter. Jackson says to his father, "Why do we even have to say that? Doesn't everybody understand that Black Lives Matter?" Well, Dad decided it was time for a history lesson. So he goes to the closet, and of course, he had a time machine. They set the time machine for 1619. They go back in time. Specifically, they go to August 1619, when a ship settles on the shores of Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia, and unloaded approximately 20 African captives. The story says that was a turning point in chattel slavery. Today, they jump forward about 250-ish years to the Civil War. The Civil War from 1861 to 1865. The northern states, known as the Union, the southern states, known as the Confederates, fought over slavery and states' rights. The 7 Confederate states, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, where we are, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas, wanted to continue to own slaves and expand slavery into the West following the election of President Lincoln. Now, you might think this seems sort of simplified on down, but remember, in the story, the primary audience was Jackson, who was 9 years old. So the story is meant to reach a young audience. The Confederacy declared war with the hopes of starting their own country. but ultimately they lost to the Union. The South lost to the North. Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, which symbolized the freedom of enslaved Africans. Congress formally passed the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery 2.5 years later in 1865. The Union entered Texas on June 19, 1865, to mark the end of the Civil War and enforce the abolishment of slavery. Today, this day is known as Juneteenth. So now we learn about the Vagrancy Act, and this is where we'll stop. The Vagrancy Act, although formerly enslaved Africans were now free, in quotation marks, a law was put in place in Virginia and then followed throughout the Confederate States that forced any person who appeared to be unemployed or homeless to work in plantations. Now this is me talking. That's definitely a throwback, right, to the old plantation lifestyle of the Old South. This law directly targeted newly freed blacks looking to rebuild their lives after the war in 1866. The Vagrancy Act remained a law until 1904. So remember, the father in this story is setting the historical context for his son about why do we have to say that Black lives matter. So next time we find out about black codes and Jim Crow, maybe next time, but eventually we'll find out about the Ku Klux Klan and convict leasing. We really are getting a nice history lesson thanks to this book, The Ellises and the Time Machine. Why do we have to say Black Lives Matter? Have a great week.
In each service, we take a moment to lift up and let go the things that we carry with us during the week. We come together in spirit, even if not in body. We come together to connect with one another, to share our common struggle and our separate lives. I encourage you to use the chat feature adjacent to the video screen to speak whatever is on your heart this morning. The joys, the concerns, the worries, the celebrations, the anticipations, the anxieties, whatever is on your mind. I particularly lift up the people of Palestine on both sides of that artificial border. The people of Gaza as well as the people of Israel. I lift up all those who continue to struggle and suffer with the effects of the pandemic, whether it be with health difficulties, financial challenges, employment insecurity, housing uncertainty, relationship strife. I want to offer my gratitude to those who took time out of their busy lives during this past week and expended some energy and physical effort to help me and Carolyn get moved. I want to thank those who extended themselves a little bit further this past week so that I could take some time off and be present in the home and do some of the work that was necessary and start to get settled in to our new house. And I'm thankful too for the Reverend Mandy Goheen, who has invited our congregation to join at her online worship service for her congregation next Sunday. At General Assembly in 2017, the Reverend Marta Valentin offered an original poem, and I found the language so incredibly powerful. I knew that I really needed to share it with you, and this was the moment to do it. But the truth is, I don't have the voice for this piece. So I'd like you to hear it in her own words.
When Unitarian Universalism found me one Easter morning, I didn't know I was looking for it. But as soon as it appeared, I recognized a hunger I had been subconsciously trying to feed. I rejoice in realizing I may have stumbled into a holy place that professed to welcome all of me, tal como soy. Months later, when I found Unitarian Universalism, I jumped for joy, smiled a great big grin across that hunger hall, danced in the aisle, felt the sun's rays come right through the ceiling, illuminating a circular warmth just around me, having discovered a thing I hadn't known existed. Between us, though, I did not feel I am home. I had a home filled with the treasures of my culture, the spirited hospitality, the community comes firstness, the love sung to us that permeates every generation. Even with that initial holy reaction, I had not run toward this thing. When I finally took another peek, I understood that I had been searching. Something had been resurrected in me. The stone had been rolled away from the dark and dank room of spiritual isolation. In time, taking the leap of faith into community that such encounters demand, the you and you of it all whispered that I was a valued human being, said aloud that I was wanted, bellowed that I was needed and might eventually be loved. It was believed as it was uttered to me. I believed it as I heard it. It seemed at the time a good fit. But I never imagined this sacred theology could get so distorted. Ultimately, to me and those of my siblings of color, the words came to mean painful, spirit-crushing lies. At least that was how the you and the you was lived out in our presence, where we learned that not all of us were accepted. Some were too much, others not enough, even as we were offered marginal platforms to teach the Pale Center. as a form of survival and a strategy to belong. We learned to perpetuate the lies. I kept lying to myself, to you, and most painfully to my daughter, hoping that one glorious sun streaking down through the clouds day, our life-affirming gospel would be true for each and every one of us. Para mi gente, the Latino and now Latinx, yes, but also for all who we say are our people. Our trans, genderqueer, and non-conforming siblings, our bisexual friends and those in constellations, our siblings of African heritage and black folk, are not hiding in plain sight, but treated as such beloved Scuderati, our even more invisibilized native cousins and Asian and Pacific Islanders, the Roma who spoke today. This poem could be just about naming people whose names are not spoken and whose faces are not seen, as the too often not intending to be but show up as immoral majority look past and over us. Beloved, if you find yourself in these words, hay esperanza. Like you, I am thoroughly exhausted, yet living this unity brings no salvation. The center of our being has just been too pale, beyond what is healthy. This thing we found made so long ago for freedom was not made free. And now, to look freer, hip and mod, questions are asked of us. How do we add some cocoa, and what kind are acceptable? How do we add un poquito de hot salsa? Do we say powwow or native gathering, handicapped or person in a wheelchair, Asian or Oriental? Please tell me. Code for, can we still do their work for them? And I ask for us, do you want us here? Do you want to be free? Actually, the questions are no longer relevant, but we are. The Pale Center needs us to remain relevant, whether they recognize it or not. We understand that the answers linger around the edges, and the center must face out to see that we are no longer trying to step carefully in. It's stomping time now. We humans of color have always reached for something more, exercising and building up quite a resilient muscle that is necessary against the many gatekeepers still trying to deter us. Being resilient in the face of dissenting voices is a gift we bring. In the fight to be an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, multiculturally faithful religion, we know, heartbreakingly so, that some sitting in this room have locked the gate from the inside and have sent some of our brightest stars away, telling us we are not worth saving. Our faith challenged to our very cores, we mourn that loss every day. As a Latina in this painful and momentous moment of our movement, it is not easy to confront our faith flaws, especially when our Latinx history is ignored and microaggressions pile up alongside tokenization. Still, many of us have chosen not to roll, walk, or limp away, despite the pain we live with, to stay in. Despite our Pale Center's penchant for making false promises toward real freedom and bleeding out what is already vital, We need to change this pattern. I fear we are reliving our past by separating out our colors in a hierarchy of importance. I say this today because I know others in our impacted Gaza are afraid to say this out loud. I know that for decades, Latinx and other people of color have been afraid to speak their truth, have been afraid to demand actions that are beyond the binary code, have been afraid to ask, why is it that we haven't organized together? I was one, and I risk saying it now because I love you. I love us. And where you go, beloveds, is where I want to go together. Even as I struggle with where my loyalties lie and the reality that I am pushed to decide which ancestral lines to lift up in a supremacist society that survives by having us believe that we have to choose and that it is a choice. When we listen to the call of something more, let us create a unity that does not lower us to the merest common denominator, knowing that dealing with our complexity forces everyone of all colors to look at ourselves deeply. Let us band together as Indigenous and people of color to be the shift that knocks the you and the you off the linear route it's been engaged in. For in 50 years, all of the self-centeredness has not led to a tipping point of self-awareness. Let us beseech, is it really too much for our pale siblings to acknowledge their privilege and do the work to dismantle every ounce of supremacy that dominates all of us? We are focused on who gets to be in the center instead of strengthening our own centers. Our individual cores are on fire, but one chaliced flame they do not make. If the pale center responds to the call for something more, they will turn and face the edges where we are. A rainbow of faces and cultures engaging in a Unitarian Universalism that breathes love into its very core from our well-worn hearts. They will find us no longer waiting, but creating a Unitarian Universalism of our own for everyone.
What I want to talk about today is something that I know some of you have heard about and even been in conversation with others about, but many of you may not even know it exists. And that is the 8th principle. Hasn't been approved yet, although more than 30 congregations have ratified it for their own congregation, and it will be coming up for a vote at GA because it is an amendment to Article 2 of the association bylaws. It will actually require 2 separate votes at GA to make it a permanent addition to our principles. But it's been the subject of a lot of conversation, at least since 2017. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. It's a little long. That was my first reaction when I initially encountered it a few years ago. It's too long. But here's the thing. Reverend Paula Cole-Jones and a number of other people within the Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, or BLUE, and within the Diverse and Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries, or DRUM, have been working on this for a long time. And it is time for those who are most directly affected by oppression to be the ones to speak on it. So, as much as the editor in me comes out, it's not mine to rewrite. It's not ours as white Unitarian Universalists to rewrite. It is simply ours as white Unitarian Universalists and as all Unitarian Universalists to come together and study and consider and discern and discuss and ultimately to vote. Yes, we can and will include this language in our covenant with one another. Now, I'm going to be sharing with you some video clips from webinars or workshops about the eighth principles. I want you to be able to hear the words of these people. Some of them are going to be saying words that you may have heard people speaking recently at UUFM. Or maybe you haven't heard it. And maybe these clips of video will help you to hear it next time someone speaks these things out loud.
What difference does it make? Well, it makes a huge difference. I think that being in a congregation that is honest and open about issues regarding white privilege and needing to combat that and racism makes it more real to me in terms of dealing with all of the other principles. Because if we're not going to deal with the eighth principle, then everything else that you tell me about the seventh principle, is really not ringing true to me. But if I was going to go someplace else and try to find another UU congregation, I would be looking for one that had the eighth principle, because otherwise it's too hard for me to go and to participate and have people. Let me put it like this: being around in a congregation where there's an eighth principle means that I'm around like-minded people, and I can be more comfortable and feel like we're all working on issues that include everybody, and it's something that happens all day, every day, throughout the year. It's not just on Black History Month.
I knew intuitively that I was very well loved in my congregation, but for them to adopt the eighth principle was a tangible expression of that love, because it means now I can hold them accountable for doing the work of the eighth principle. The fact that not only did they adopt the eighth principle, but began immediately doing the work. And I've seen changes in the congregation, in the attitudes and in the minds of the members of the congregation. It has given me a brand new congregation. Wow. that I feel a part of, and we can work through our differences.
For me, it is the difference between just kind of resting on our laurels and actually taking action. I think some of the reasons why I've heard that certain congregations have not adopted it is that they feel that the other principles cover it, but it doesn't. It absolutely does not cover it, because that eighth principle is about action. It's about dismantling racism, and it talks about doing it within the institution, and that's our institution. And so it's about doing the work that needs to be done that you think you're doing, but you're not really doing. And so by you adopting this principle actually shows that you really do love and care about the community. So you say that you want more people of color to come, that you don't understand why we're not there. Well, if you are not adopting this principle, or you're voting on this principle or voting against it, then I cannot comprehend why congregations have voted against this principle. That to me is going against every single one of the other principles. That's not love. This is action to me. When I found out that our congregation that we have to kind of even have this whole long discussion and this long plan about it, I literally am like, why do we even have to talk about it? It should just be like, we talk about it one Sunday and everybody says yes.
And Paula, I know in your presentation, you talk about accountability. And I also know that word tends to turn people off. And I think that says something. The fact that word is so alarming to people. I hope that we all hold each other accountable. I want that for myself. I want others to hold me accountable. I want to hold myself accountable. So to me, this gives a framework. It gives a framework to talk about things explicitly instead of letting things happen and keeping them quiet and keeping them having people of color talking about it in our groups. And then I don't know what happens in the other groups, but I think that it gives us permission to really call it out. So when we experience these parts of white supremacy culture that come out in our meetings, in our groups, in our services, that we can actually say, hey, this is happening. Remember the 8th principle, and we can hold each other to that. So that's one piece. And then the other piece for me personally is that it gives me hope that we will truly be a multicultural faith. And that, I get so much when I go to our drum events, and I've only been virtually because I didn't know. I spent 3 years in a small fellowship and didn't know about drum, was never told. And so I sat there and experienced services where it was, we white people need to do this and we white people need to do that. And sometimes, and not even that enough, but I would go, am I invisible? That's not me. You're talking to a group and that's not including me. And didn't even know that there was such thing as drum. So when I did, and I finally got to attend, I was like, yes, this is it. I felt at home because, and especially being a mixed race person, I know what it means to bring different cultures together, whether it's musically, spiritually, beliefs-wise, all of those things. So there's a hope for me that we really are building the beloved multicultural community. And I know how good that's going to be for everyone.
There's the one part of me that wants to talk about how my congregation is a good congregation. And, I can do that. That's true. I moved myself to a friend status. We have a Black Lives Matter sign. And the Black Lives Matter sign, if we are going to live what we advertise, I think you have to look closer at the documents that we have within the church. And I think it's very important that we adopt a principle. The discussion around the adoption of a principle, we didn't say we weren't going to really deal with it. We said we weren't going to deal with it at this time. It was put on hold. For me, I'm at a point in life where I really don't want to put justice on hold. I don't want to put identity on hold. And so it's lonely. So I can go out in other places and connect and be with activists. It's a lot of work to be in the congregation and people talking about anti-racism, talking about community and doing good things in the community. My minister sticks her neck out. She jumps out. I'll say that. But it's more than the minister being there. A minister can't be out there doing it alone. There are good people in the congregation who want to do justice work. But the discussion, and to listen to the discussion at the annual meeting about why we hold this, I was hearing a hierarchy of oppression start to come up. That, well, what about women? And so, well, what about women? What specifically about Black women or women of color? I mean, it's like, well, the same thing happens to, this comparison. That's a painful discussion to hear.
I think I'm a Unitarian because I really do believe in the 7 principles and the eight principles. So I try to live those, and it's the UU Church is the place where I have my best chance of doing that, I think. Sometimes I just think what the work we have to do to recognize ourselves in the context of white supremacy and racism, I'm not sure that we've done all the work we need to do. I think the 8th principle, if we were really practicing it, would be transformative, could change our relationship to not only our congregations, but to ourselves and to our community. So I see the possibilities, but I don't think the 8th principle, and sometimes this is kind of how I hear it. It's like it's this, sweet little thing that we do that is very heartwarming and loving, and it is certainly that. But to get to that requires some hard work and facing some hard things that I'm not sure that as a congregation we face. And I don't want to sound cynical because I'm incredibly hopeful, but I am trying to live in the truth. I just think I think it's hard work. And I think what we'd have to face about ourselves as a congregation and as congregations would be difficult. And I am not sure that we've developed the muscle as Unitarians to do all the work that we need to do to make the 8th principle be real and transformative. But I think if we did that work, it would be, it would just change our reality in terms of how we see our world and how we move in it.
I think that UUs are like a really well-kept secret, especially during these times when so many people want to do something and join together and, for good when these crazy times, and they would love to go to a church that represents, or a society or whatever you want to call it, that represents their thoughts and their feelings and their principles about things. So I think the 8th principle is a way to be more welcoming.
Yeah. It seems to those of us who live in the idyllic progressive mindset of Unitarian Universalism, it seems as though it's already included in the 7 principles. I mean, we already said the worth and dignity of every person. Why we gotta single something out like that? And if you don't remember why I think it is not just important, but absolutely necessary to be specific. I encourage you to go back and listen again to the service I did. All means none. All never means all. As long as we are non-specific, then our covenant to stand against injustice has no more meaning in real life than did Thomas Jefferson's words have in the 18th century when he said, all men are created equal. All never means all. We're at this point. in the history of Unitarian Universalism, in the history of American culture, and in the world, in the history of human life. We're at this point. We've just come out of this presidential administration characterized by dehumanization, oppression, and violence. And as I mentioned last week, the churches have a theological position that claims justice and love for all of God's children. And yet, we few Unitarian Universalists in Montgomery remain the only religious institution with that sign in front of our building. It falls to us. The Reverend Michael Tino, who is a co-director of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, published in their latest email newsletter an account of something he had just learned that I did not know. And he found, and I agreed, made a powerful metaphor for what we are doing here today. He says he learned that the lungs of birds evolved in such a way that air flows one way, in one opening and out the other, which allows them to do a number of things. One of the things that it allows them to do, for example, is they can sing while they are flying. And Reverend Michael has a number of things to say, a number of implications from that image, but to me the most compelling was it is possible for us as Unitarian Universalists to be doing more than one thing. We can continue to come together and love each other and depend on each other and learn and connect and be in fellowship, engage in times and acts of worship, and also to be actively and accountably engaged in anti-oppression work, both within our congregation, and outside our walls. This summer we will start formally some of that work of accountability and anti-oppression effort within our congregation based on that book, Widening the Circle of Concern, that I started talking about almost a year ago. It came out of GA last year. Being a Unitarian Universalist is not about what we don't believe. It's about what we do and engage in to work toward the beloved community. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. May it be so.
out what love just told me. Get into the moment. Get into the moment. Set a place at the table. Say your grace just 'cause you're able. Get into the moment. Get into the moment. As a spark ignites a flame. Holy, holy is each name. Every smile on every face is a prayer. In the dark and in the day, in the swirling Milky Way, in the miles of open space, here and there. Get into the moment. 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 From the grave to the cradle, there's only one truth, only one place. Get into the moment. Get into the moment. From the walker to the stroller, meditator, holy roller. Get into the moment. Get into the moment. Let the love sun's embrace light your heart as it does your face. Let the quiet of the moon get you free. Every day is a new birth. There is magic on this earth. You can wield it if you choose to let it be. If you can get into the moment. Get into the moment. Get into the moment. Get into the moment. I'm right here in the moment. And if you feel answers are hard to find, just draw near to your own inner peace of mind, 'cause it will guide your heart if you will stand still. Get into the moment. Get into the moment. Get into the moment. Lose yourself into the moment. Love is in the moment. Peace is in the moment. Joy is in the moment. True love is in the moment. Sing into the moment. Dance to the moment. Laugh into the moment. Give your love into the moment.
So come join us for discussion second hour. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more during that time. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the eighth principle, the process that has gotten us here and the process that lies ahead. And then I'm going to invite your comments, your thoughts, and your questions. For now, our service has ended. May our service begin.
this world's delight. High hopes we have for the future and our goals in sight. No, we don't get depressed. Here's what we call our golden rule. Have faith in you and the things you do. You can't go wrong. This is our family jewel. We are family. I've got all my sisters with me. I've got all of them. We are family. Get up, everybody, and sing. We are family now. I feel all my brothers with me. Feel them all around. We are family. Get up, everybody. Get up, everybody, and sing. We